I beforehand. We have a significant amount of people on the presentation already. Nikki, I think there must be over 104
104
people,
at the moment, and I'm
104
admitting
people on at the moment, Jason. So you've become quite popular. I was expecting when Jason was going to present that he would have this python draped over his shoulders. I would have expected him to have done that. But let me just introduce you to Jason. I never knew Jason until I needed him for some sort of strange and exotic snake that had been brought into the country and had bitten one of our proudly South African people. And I had to find this Snakebite Anti-venom and pay Jason almost R500,000 for the anti-venom. But I can tell you that he's very reliable source for us as Netcare for the exotic and a good advice. So Jason owns the Hartbeespoort Sport Dam Snake and Animal Centre. Am I correct? Hartbeespoort Sport Dam. There next to the green patch of lake, the stinky green patch of lake. We always thought it was Jason's animals that was stinking, and then we realized it was the lake that was actually stinking. And he's been very supportive of Netcare in terms of what we're doing, and he's currently a member of NSAG, which is the National Snakebite Advisory Group. And there are many of the guys that are on today that are actually part of the group are really expert. But Jason and I got talking about anti-venom and the shortage of anti-venom. And as you know, NSAG wrote an open letter through Tim Hardcastle to the Minister of Health to address the problems we were having with snakebite anti-venom production and availability, and was getting quite tough out there. And I think that things are maybe settling, but I think a lot of people don't know anything about snakebite anti-venom. And the reason for that is that even in my group, there are still some hospitals that have 1 or 2 vials. I'm not sure what you do with it, because all you can really do with 1 vial of anti-venom is tickle someone's fancy. You're certainly not going to be able to deal with a snake bite, and for you to wait for other vials to come to you is certainly not going to work. So Jason, you know me, when there's a problem, then I say, well, let's educate everybody. There are 140 people now that will know a lot more about anti-venom when you're finished, and I'd like to hand over to you. Oh, I wanted to tell a story. When I worked at Charlotte Maxeke, which was then the Joburg Gen, I remember there was a receptionist there, and there was a guy who came in with a snake bite, and he was one of the guys who deals with anti-venom and snake. It might even have been Mike Perry. I'm not sure, Mike, I'm only joking if you're on. And when he said to the reception, what do you do? And she said to him, what's your job description? And he said, herpetologist. And she said, what? And he said, herpetologist. And she said, well, what do you do? He says, I handle snakes, I manage snakes. So she says, a snake charmer, I'll just write snake charmer, and then move on from there. So Jason, welcome. And let's hope we learn a lot more today about anti-venom than we think.
Thank you very much, Mandy. As your friendly snake charmer, I shall try my best. Let's start with the talk there. So I have my son assisting me this afternoon. He's an engineering IT student, so he's going to be assisting me with some of the more technical aspects of computers. I have limited knowledge there. Okay, welcome all to my talk this afternoon. It's a very interesting talk, and it's a very current talk for all of us. So snake antivenom is more complicated than you may know. And as you all know by now, we have a crisis. So who am I? There we go, Mandy. I'm playing around with snakes. It's what I do for a living. I have been told I've got a face for radio. I fully agree. But basically what we do is we're the Snake and Animal Park at Hartbeespoort Dam, and we do a number of different things. As you can see there, very often we provide identification for hospitals, nurses, doctors, veterinary clinics, or the lay public in general if they've got a snake problem. So for us, and what for me is I'm very proud of, is I was invited by the South African Society of Surgery of the Hand to their 49th annual Congress. And I presented there on snake envenomation to the hand and fingers. And that was a very big moment for me. And I've also had the opportunity to present to the South African Orthopedic Surgeons Association in 2019. And as most of you know, you've seen me around your hospitals or the Pharmaceutical Society doing the necessary talks. And we also talk to the guys at WITS in tropical medicine and hygiene, specifically their postgraduate students, and we talk to them about snakes and snake bite. So this is what we do for a living. So let's hop right into antivenoms. Basically, words of the world used to describe antivenoms. Every different region is going to have a different name to describe something which is basically similar. So in the States, we've had products like antivenines, anti-snake venom serum, snake antivenom in French. I'm not even going to try and butcher that French word. And then the modern word we use nowadays is antivenoms in the modern description. This is used in the modern description for the English.
Sorry, there's somebody who's not on mute. Can you please mute? Thank you.
Okay, so antivenoms. Basically, when I started working at the park after studying, I was given the task of looking after the antivenoms because we stock a number of exotic venomous snakes, and these are there in case of accident. So this got me very interested in the various antivenoms produced from around the world, looking at their package inserts. I started researching in our library, quickly done everything I could in that one, and then I landed up at the CSIR at WITS Medical Library and at the University of Pretoria as well, their medical library, doing a lot of research. Because at that stage in the early 90s, there was very little information available on snake and snake bite, and specifically antivenoms. Some of the package inserts I can remember reading was if you were bitten by a venomous snake, you use 2 vials of antivenom and that would save your life. After doing extensive research, I found basically it's a very hit and miss affair, and there's a lot more that goes in on antivenoms. So if we go in a little bit further, I'm just going to give a brief description here, and then we'll get into the meat of the talk. But at this point in time, it's snakebite antivenom and how it works. What is antivenom? It's an antibody product designed to neutralize venom toxins. It's only specific therapy that has proven effective for these envenomations. We'll go into a few things a little bit later, but let's start off with this. It's a purified fraction of immunoglobulin or immunoglobulin fragments, fraction from the plasma of animals that have been hyperimmunized against one or more venoms. So we get different types of antibodies. We have the Fab antibody, we have the Fab2 antibody, and the whole IgG molecule. So to cut a long story short, what we're interested in currently is the Fab2 products. By far, the most antivenom manufacturers are using Fab2. We know of one Fab antivenom producer located in Wales. They make a specific antivenom for rattlesnakes for North America, and it is extremely expensive, and it's called Crofab. So Fab2, very commonly used molecule in the different laboratories, and then the IgG molecule. We'll go into a little bit of more in-depth on these different molecules a little bit later, but this is what their basic structure looks like. So the important thing is for us is the venom antivenom reaction, and basically what you want to see is complete immobilization of the venom toxins so that these toxins can be then bound and moved to the kidneys from which they are excreted. It's a very complicated process. I'm not going to go in depth into this process, but as you can already start picking up, you need sufficient antibodies to actually bind that venom for it to be neutralized. So let's quickly go into the types of antivenom which are commonly available. We have monovalence covering a single species, bivalence covering 2 species, tetravalence covering 3 species, or tetravalence, which are basically nowadays known as polyvalence, i.e. covering many, many species. Throughout the world, you will find combinations of these different types of antivenom. We know in South Africa, we use the monovalent worm-slung antivenom and the polyvalent antivenom. Examples of those. So basically, antivenoms can produce to cover many different species of animals, and throughout the world, many different animals are covered. Spiders, scorpions, as you can see there, ticks in Australia, they have problems with tick paralysis. Caterpillars in South America, once you come into contact with the bristles, can result in severe hemorrhagic disorders. Fish antivenom for your stonefish, native to parts of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. And you can basically see where most of these antivenoms are actually made. We've also got jellyfish antivenom for box jellyfish, considered by many to be the most venomous animal on the planet. Sea snake antivenom, and of course the terrestrial land snakes. Good examples of these is SA polyvalent and the premium serums Panaf Africa. So as you can see, we've got most animals covered. It's quite comprehensive. And then just to continue here, what animals are actually used in the production of antivenoms? So we have a whole range of animals being used. We have rabbits, but as you guys can see, mostly used for research purposes, not suitable for large-scale economic production. Dogs, the antivenom producers producing the tick paralysis antivenom in Australia, they actually use dogs to produce it in. Sheep, as we know, we've got one manufacturer, Crofab, from therapeutic antibodies, a very, very, very expensive product indeed. Currently, there's also been ongoing research in the Middle East with some experimental camel antivenoms. However, there's been no large-scale production as yet. Some manufacturers started testing mules. They got satisfactory antibodies, and this was in the 1960s and 70s, but it fell out of favor compared to horses. Because of the horses being larger, being able to produce a larger antibody yield, this is the current animal of choice for most antivenom manufacturers. Then we've got some humans. Some private individuals have created their own personal immunization protocols and have produced effective antibodies to the targeted species. However, again, no commercial use. When it comes to experimental stuff, we know that they've been using chicken eggs. Some good work has resulted from this, but again, no large-scale commercial production yet. And repurposed experimental drugs. Well, one thing COVID did give us is a whole range of these experimental drugs, and there's been lots of testing going on with a lot of these repurposed drugs, especially metal protease and phospholipase inhibitors. And examples are Vesplilideb, repurposed drug that has been tested on spider and snake venoms with good neutralization results. There's a lot of current research going on, and basically the best they've been able to pick up is this: if you take one of these experimental drugs and you use the anti-snakebite serum, you have a superior outcome. Currently, clinical trials 1 of Vesplilideb is being done in Kenya and India, and they're basically trying to just figure out what is the toxicology profile of these products in humans. So there's a lot of interesting potential on the horizon for newer products, but most of these are realistically 7 to 10 years away. For us, that's an extremely, extremely long time, and we need to look closer to home on what we need to do to overcome our current challenges. So basically a brief history of antivenom. I don't want to bore you guys to death, but just some interesting facts here. Antivenom was first manufactured more than 125 years ago. And to tell you the truth, we're using very similar technologies, maybe with better purification processes, but the basic premise is the same. Nothing's changed in 125 years. Compare that to possibly cancer research, newer cancer drugs. It's just mind-boggling. So numerous researchers contributed valuable input over the years. I'm not going to specify specific individuals, but there were many of them, and a lot of them were South African. A notable antivenom researcher was Albert Calmette. He was a disciple of Louis Pasteur. Everybody knows the story of Louis Pasteur and the Pasteur Institute in Paris. He worked on cobra venom in Saigon and at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, and he studied different immunization protocols. So through his efforts, he was able to obtain a protocol which provided sufficient protection against the cobra envenomation. Subsequently, many scientists from around the world began using this protocol for the dangerous species found in their respective countries. And this was happening in countries like Brazil, in Japan, and other countries as well, including South Africa. Over the years, more research on antivenoms has led to improved immunization protocols and refinement. So basically, at this stage of the game, we want to differentiate the different antivenoms by their generations. So you have first generation, second generation, third generation, or fourth generation. And there's a lot of ongoing work to classify the various antivenoms in those stages. But for some context here, this is a South African context. The provision of snake antivenom began in 1901 in a laboratory in Pietermaritzburg in KZN. So the Italian mafia at play already early on in the game. And it was first tested for its therapeutic use in 1903. And this was carried out by Dr. Watkins Pitchford. Double barrel names, very posh. Okay, so we can see very early on in South African history that they were busy working on these problems of snake and antivenoms. However, what we do know is until 1930, the only commercial available antivenom in South Africa was produced at the Pasteur Institute in France, and it was made from venom sourced from South Africa. Venom antivenom production began in South Africa at the Institute for Medical Research from about 1928. And what we do know is originally it only consisted of puff adder and Cape Cobra venom that we used to produce these antivenoms. Ongoing research during the 1930s showed that not all important South African snakes were neutralized, and over the years, more venoms were added to this mixture to produce a truly polyvalent antivenom. We've got a lot to be proud of here, and it's funny how sometimes history does move in circles. So let's just chat a bit about how we got to where we are today. And it's quite simple here. We have a crisis identified 69 years ago, and it's still ongoing today, believe it or not. The problem of worldwide snakebite mortality was first recognized in the 1950s, especially in warm developing countries. And this was published by S. Swaroop and others in the World Health Organization in 1954.
Yes.
Jason, I really apologize. It is quite rude. There is someone who is not on mute. If you don't want to listen to the lecture, I'm quite comfortable that you log off, but please don't talk over the speaker. It is really rude. Thank you, Jason. Please continue, and I apologize.
No stress at all. Thank you, Mandy. So, guys, basically, 1954 was the magic year. WHO got involved and they started publishing ever since. So over the years, WHO has played a central role in propagating antivenom standards for the production and control and regulation of these antivenom immunoglobulins. It's an ongoing process. Some notable examples of these releases was in 1981, where the progress and standardization of venoms and antivenoms was made. This assisted the world's antivenom producers in a direction, and it really laid the foundations to where we're sitting with modern antivenom production. Another big example of this was in 1989 with snake bites and its appraisals, the global situation. Again, this just brought attention back to what's happening internationally, because snake bites are happening in developing countries. So the last major update from WHO on the guidelines for the production, control, and regulations of snake antivenom is in 2016. And this is the guidelines which have been set out for the production of these antibodies. There's rumors that this is about to be tweaked and that new guideline, more stringent guidelines will be set in the future, possibly this year. So it's very interesting. But with these guidelines, they've basically set out regulations to control where they get the venom, the conditions that the snakes are kept in, where they're kept, how often they're eating, how often they're shedding, do they need any veterinary care. So there's a lot that goes into it. It goes into the production facilities, how they regulate these production facilities, levels of cleanliness, hygiene, equipment. So basically, and even just basic stuff like terminology. I advise everybody, please, if you can, go online, get this WHO guideline, go through it. It's a wealth of information. A good read indeed. So let's just have a chat here further with the production crisis history and conclusion before we get into the meat. So as we have already established that basic snakebite falls on the shoulders of the developing world and is a neglected tropical disease. So basically we know that snakebite affects the poorest of the poor. And research budgets are rather spent on more lucrative treatments which offer high returns of investment. That's the basic premise. And because of that, we've had a lot of anti-venom producing companies actually exit the market. And two notable examples of these are Beringwerke. They started anti-venom production in the 1950s for Africa, and they stopped in the 1990s, leaving a massive shortfall. The Pasteur Institute, which morphed into Sanofi Pasteur, they started anti-venom production in the 1920s, and they exited in 2016. So from this, we can actually see that the economics of anti-venom and its production is neglected. Nobody's interested in it because there's no return of investment. And this is where we sit today. Excuse me. So when it comes to our current anti-venom producer in South Africa, we know that they have significant structural problems. And the question is how long it would take to overcome these challenges is uncertain. And what we do know is that this could possibly take many, many years to rectify. This is not the first time that this has become a problem. I can remember in the 1990s, the early 2000s, the late 2010s and upwards, there has been supply problems. And in some cases, there was always rumors, would SAVP be viable going forward? It's a very challenging environment that they work in, heavily regulated. It needs a substantial amount of investment. And from a personal point of view, I know the staff at the SAVP have attempted to move mountains to overcome these difficulties. So kudos to the SAVP staff. I know they have really gone above and beyond in many cases to keep that anti-venom flowing and to provide the services that they do. But we do know we're sitting in a crisis. And the point is, I have been privy to this. I have received calls daily from various veterinarians, from medical doctors, from different hospitals, everybody begging for anti-venom. And we were able to assist a few institutions, and we were fortunately donated by some hospital groups some expired anti-venom, which we were able to pass on to these veterinarians treating these dogs. But it's a really sad affair, and the point is, most of these dogs that are bitten land up going to the veterinarian. There's nothing else they can do for them. And these dogs are euthanized, a real tragedy. And we've seen cases where, a very sad case where mom and dad died in a car accident. Daughter was left alive. She had a dog which was given to her by mom and dad. And dog was bitten, and it was brought to our attention that this child was going to basically be losing her only connection with her parents. And that's very tough to sit through, and it's emotionally very challenging to see this. So dare I say, we have got these problems, but we do have some solutions in the pipeline, which we can basically look at using to overcome our problems which we currently have. So basically, how is antivenom made and its purification process? Comparison of SAV polyvalent and PANF premium polyvalent. Okay, so basically I've got two antivenoms here. There are about 3 or 4 other manufacturers of African antivenom. Most of these products have not got any sort of peer-reviewed information regarding their products. They do not have WHO or GMPO certifications. The efficacy of these products is in question. A couple of them have actually been flagged as potential hazards in countries like Kenya and Tanzania, and they've lost their official distribution licenses due to these problems. So I've spent quite a bit of time searching through and obviously liaising with different companies. And to tell you the truth, PANF is probably the only polyvalent antivenom that we can actually compare to the SAVP product. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to show you some information, and we're going to go through this. So the different products: SAVP polyvalent, PANF premium serums and vaccines. It's produced in India. And we're going to talk about the production process, but both of them use equine. One is a liquid, one is lyophilized. Both consist of Fab2 immunoglobulins. The route of administration is intravenous. And for the SAVP product, we need a cold chain storage of between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius at all times. For the PANF, we can store below 30 degrees and no refrigeration is required. Shelf life is 3 years. For the PANF, it's 4. Year of introduction is 1971 versus 2014 for the PANF product. And the number of vials being produced yearly is 11 to 13,000 for the SAV product and 100,000 for the PANF. So the PANF has actually been marketed into the rest of Africa, and most of our border countries, Namibia, Angola, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zambia, Mozambique, are all using the PANF products at this stage. Because of the unavailability of SAVP and PANF, we can actually promise supply. So when you're going to make an antivenom, what you need to do is you need to target the venomous species that you want. You need to milk these species. And this venom is then mixed in with an adjuvant injected into the horses. Increasing amounts of the above mixture is injected into the horses every 2 weeks or so. And this is used to build up the horses' antibodies. So if we look at the SAVP and the PANF product, we can look at the origins of the venom. SAVP, basically South Africa and Central Africa, and PANF goes wider afield. So we've got South African snake species, East African snake species from Tanzania, West Africa from Nigeria. And a basic comparison there, you can see that SAVP is consisting of 10 different species of snakes, and the PANF is 14 species is used in the production of this antivenom. Additionally, paraspecific testing has been done on the various snake species on SAVP. There's recent data out, and as you look there to my references, you can see where this information has been published. So we know that shield-nosed cobra, the spittlap species, is covered by SAVP, at least in mice testing, and the night as well, specifically Causus rhombetus. Other night adders we're not so sure of yet. There's no information. So if we go into the PANF and we start looking at various species of other animals that were tested against, we can see that PANF is showing paraspecific neutralization against a number of other different species of cobra occurring throughout Africa. There's some new independent research being done. It should be published and peer-reviewed pretty shortly. And then to this paraspecific list, we're going to add another 4 species of snakes as well. Please have a look at all my references down there. I'm not sucking this stuff out of my thumb. This is all in peer-reviewed journals, and they're all pretty well thought of journals at that. So when we start looking at the purification process of actual snakebite antivenom, we're going to do a comparison here. So the screening of production animals for advantageous agents and health checks, SAVP does it, PANF does it as well. Enzyme digestion, specifically to get rid of the FC portion of that immunoglobulin. SAVP uses both pepsin and ammonium sulfate. They're one of the few producers actually still using ammonium sulfate in their production. And at this stage, PANF also uses pepsin. The next important step is the caprylic acid stabilization and purification process. SAVP does not use this, PANF does. This was an additional purification process which was introduced in the late 1990s, 1998 to be exact, and has basically been taken up by the world's major manufacturers, including institutes like Institute Butantan, well known in Brazil. In Asia, there's a couple of countries doing that as well. And at the end of the day, the reason why this was actually introduced is you get a purer product from it. So this is now the go-to thing which is happening. So diafiltration, does SAVP do it? Yes, they do. PANF does it as well. So there's another additional purification process called ion exchange chromatography. SAVP does not currently do this. However, Premium Serums is currently researching the column chromatography purification for PANF. This ion chromatography process was basically introduced by the French in the late 1990s, and when they had an immunoglobulin switch over from their old product called Ipso Africa to Fav Africa, they introduced this purification process. And in the relevant journals and peer-reviewed data which is out there, the reaction rates on Fav Africa ranges from 0.5 to 4% of all administrations. Most of these tests were done in West Africa, in Ichthys bites, and they had fantastic results with the PANF product. With the Fav Africa product. Personally, we've used the Fav Africa twice, both in Ichthys bites from outside South Africa, basically West Africa and East Africa, and this stuff works phenomenally well. However, being the French product, it was discontinued in 2016. So pasteurization, SAVP does carry out a pasteurization process, PANF does not. Endotoxin exclusion, yes, and we know it's hypoallergenic for the PANF product as well. And lyophilization, no, it's a liquid. PANF, yes, it is lyophilized. Lyophilized products are considered more stable, and this is why we're able to keep the products not in a cold chain, but as long as it's below 30 degrees. So it's reconstitution time, SAVP is immediate, it's a liquid, and PANF within 1 minute. Those are the comparisons. So if we look at SAVP, we've got cresol, and there's also phenol is also used as a preservative. There's quite a bit of information now being published where there are questions regarding preservatives in snake antivenoms. And there was a concerted move to actually reduce the percentage of these preservatives in snake antivenom because they were actually linked to adverse reactions. So the possibility of them adding to anaphylaxis or anaphylactoid or allergic type reactions was there, and this is being currently investigated. And that's why if you have a look there, the SAVP standard is 0.35%. Of the certificate of analysis which we used, they had 0.31%. That's very high compared to the PANF product, which is 0.07%. So PANF really went that extra mile, done the research to reduce the preservative contents in their product. And as you can see there, the solid percentage of SAVP is around 20% and less than 3% for the PANF. pH levels you can see there of 6.2, and then for the PANF it's between 6 and 7%. So now I'm just going to have a sip of water, and then I want to get into the proteins. So we know that SAVP is a very effective antivenom, and we can see why, and that's by the protein content. That's where the antibodies are, and that's what's going to provide immunization. When we look at SAVP, we see 16.8%, and then we look at the PANF antivenom at 7.3%. From this, we can already see that there is going to be different neutralizing abilities for these two different products. If we go down a little bit further, we can see that GMP process, which is now part of the World Health Organization accreditation process, does SAVP have this? No, they do not. And they also do not have WHO accreditation. Does PANF have this? Yes, they have got the GMP process certification, and they've also got the WHO accreditation as well. So this is where we can start seeing there's actually significant differences between these two products. So if we go down further, we can start looking at antivenom reaction rates of these two different products. So guys, at the end of the day, everybody's used SAVP. Everybody's got experiences with it. There has been some peer-reviewed articles published in the South African Medical Journal. One very well-known publication was in 1998 in the Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, and the heading of the article gives it away: high incidence of early anaphylactoid reactions to SAVP polyvalent antivenom. And they quoted a figure as high as 76% of all antivenom treated patients had a severe reaction. Some people have seen less than this. There are one or two which claim higher rates. Again, go into the literature, have a look. It's well established. And another worthwhile resource is going to have a look at Roger Blaylock's master's thesis, and that's published online, and he actually goes into that in quite detailed explanation. So since the commercial introduction of PANF in 2014 to various African countries, and specifically MSF, there have been no reports of adverse reactions to the antivenom, which is PANF, and if there were, WHO would definitely know about it, and there would be a paper trail, but currently there is none. And the reason why we can say this is the purity levels of the PANF antibodies is above 91%, which is very, very high. The purity levels on this product are great. So when it comes to antivenom reaction rates, I think there will probably be many different views and many different viewpoints. And I'd just like to share some information with you guys at this stage, where basically to bring a product to market is 7 years of hard work, of meeting regulatory requirements, of permitting. So it takes about 7 years to get a product registered. And Premium Serums and Vaccines done that. So their antivenom was brought to market slightly later than some of the others, but it is a superior product in all ways. So this is the interesting one, and I'm sure this will kick off a debate. So there are numerous other peer-reviewed published articles, i.e. data supporting similar neutralization results. And the one I've drawn up for today is a reference used for neutralization. And this is by an article for 2 snakebite antivenoms have potential to reduce the sweaties dependency upon a single increasingly unavailable product. It's busy with its peer review process. And one of the members of our group is heavily involved in this article. And that's great. It shows you that people are out there already looking at alternatives because SAVP is unavailable. So if we look at the various columns, this shows you the amount of antivenom that is required to actually protect against a milligram of venom. When it comes to puff adder, we see the SAVP product is excellent. The Pan-F and the Pan-African, not nearly as good, but it still provides protection. Wrinkles for the SAVP product, Pan-F, the Pan-African is significantly higher in protecting against wrinkles. You require more anti-venom to protect against that milligram of venom. And then if we look down to the third row where we look at Mozambique and spitting cobra, and you can see there that basically Pan-F is the most effective anti-venom, even more effective than the Mozambique spitting cobra, against which the SAVP product is actually manufactured. So Pan-F in this regard shows superior neutralization than the SAVP product. Snouted cobra, there we see that we need to start looking at doubling up to reach the same sort of neutralization capacities for snouted cobra. And when it comes to Mamba, with a Pan-F, we need to double up, and the Pan-African ICP, which is a Costa Rican-based product, we're going to basically need to give 3 to 4 vials for every vial of SAVP antivenom. So, on last night's discussion group, Pan-F was compared to a couple of other non-African antivenoms. One of them is the Pan-African ICP product. This is my whole problem with Pan-African ICP product. They do not have a GMPO, they're not WHO accredited, and they produce an antivenom which is more or less specific for a sweaty. It covers their 5 major venomous snakes. In South Africa, we've got more than just 5 dangerous snakes. We've got Cape Cobra, Green Mamba, Forest Cobra, Gaboon Adder. So these are more species of snake than the ICP product covers. And basically, we can tell you from this point in time, they use black mamba in their immunization protocol. It will protect only against black mamba. Already in the 1950s, the South Africans knew under Dr. Christensen, if you want to produce a good mamba antivenom covering all 4 species of mamba or 3 species of mamba, you needed to use 3 or 4 species of mamba to get that paraspecific or that actual neutralization capacity of the antivenom. The Germans tried that. They were producing a product called Beringwerke Central Africa, and they used black mamba and Verdus mamba venoms, which is a West African green mamba. This antivenom was tried out in Kenya in the 1970s, and they had dismal failure when it came to Jameson's mamba bite, which is a species widely occurring in Kenya. So the whole thing is as well, there's quite an interesting example also with the snouted cobra. In 2009, an author by the name of Casol produced work on basic neurotoxins in African Naja. And from their research, they found that the snouted cobra did not fit into the profiles of normal neurotoxic African cobras. Here I'm talking about Naja nivea, Cape Cobra, Naja haja, Naja melanoleuca, and its various species. If you produced an antivenom with a pure neurotoxic venom, it did not provide protection against snouted cobra. And in this case here, if we look at this, I can find no data supporting the use of snouted cobra antivenom in any other species of neurotoxic nausea. So again, this Pan-African ICP, it's basically specific for a sweaty, and it's not covering all the dangerous species of venomous snakes in South Africa, which the SAVP does, and the Pan-Af product does that as well. So when it comes to these different neutralizing abilities of these products, please guys go ahead and have a look at all my different references to get a really good understanding of where I'm coming from. So let's quickly go into the indications for anti-venom. What's nice about this is this was from the Snakebite Flipper card, Hospital Care Provider, SAS 2022. And we can basically take this for the SAVP and the Pan-Af product, combine it and use the same set of indications for when is actual antivenom needed. Most of you are aware of this hospital flipper card. It's been sent far and wide in South Africa at this stage to various doctors, nurses, hospitals. So it is well known. But basically from this, we can see that all patients with systemic signs and symptoms or severe spreading local tissue damage should receive antivenom. Any signs of neurotoxicity, positively identified puff adder, gaboon adder, spitting cobra, wrinkle bites, and evidence of severe progressive cytotoxicity. Goes on a little bit further to explain unidentified snake bites with evidence of severe progressive cytotoxic envenomation, i.e. swelling of the whole foot or hand within 1 hour, swelling to the knee or elbow within 6 hours, swelling of the whole limb within 12 hours, progressive local symptoms progressing at more than 5 centimeters per hour, discoloration of the skin or necrosis at the bite site, a threatened airway due to swelling, and evidence of complication or compartment syndrome. Thrombocytopenia or raised INR, abnormal TEG or rotum, and positively identified worm slung bite. Do not wait for the onset of a venom-induced consumptive coagulopathy. Well set out, well written. If you use this indication, you cannot make a mistake. So let's go into the dosages. So the initial dosage of antivenom, and here we're back to SAVP and the Pan-Af, progressive weakness, i.e. your neurotoxins. Current recommendations for SAVPs between 80 and 120 mils of polyvalent antivenom. For Pan-Af, currently the recommendation is 200 mils of Pan-Af polyvalent antivenom. Now, before people start getting excited, please remember the following. SAVP is sitting at 16% of the protein content, Pan-Af is around 7%. If you're doubling up the dose of SAVP, if you're doubling up the dose of Pan-Af product, you're going to land up with the same amount of proteins given product to product. So in this case, you basically need to double up on the Pan-Af product to reach the sort of antivenom neutralization abilities which we have with the SAVP. So again, for progressive painful swelling syndrome, we've got 40 to 80 mils of antivenom. For the Pan-Af, again, go with 200 mils of the product. It's effective for our neurotoxins and it's effective for our cytotoxins. It's not effective for the worm slung. And if we have a hematoxic patient, worm slung monospecific is the antivenom of choice to treat that. So already we can see there's a difference in the quantity of antivenom that we need to give. Just remember the protein content is very important, and that is what we've got to look at the end of the day, and that'll give us an effective antivenom. So the response to antivenom treatment. So these are the initial doses which are given. If the following is not criteria are not met, you might need to give a second dose of antivenom. And in cases like this, cardiovascular effects usually respond within 30 minutes. Spontaneous systemic bleeding usually stops within 30 minutes. Blood coagulability usually returns to normal within 6 hours, sometimes 12. Neurotoxic signs often change slowly. I'd like to put a caveat with that. This is true, especially if there's a delay between bite and antivenom treatment. I get to see very interesting results from snakebite in both public and private sector hospitals. And where we're situated geographically, we're sitting between urbanized and semi-urbanized areas. And we get to see snakebite usually patient is bitten, and within 30 minutes to 60 minutes, they're in hospital. Usually when the patient is bitten, when they phone EMS, we are notified, so we know with the hospitals what's coming in, and we can be there with antivenom. So our catchment area, we are seeing bites very, very quickly after the patients have been bitten. We can identify the snakes, and then a treatment protocol is laid out. So very often, because we're catching the bites early, we reduce the quantity of antivenom that you give in the bites. And we have very good responses to this. Earlier with the snakebite group in the year, we had a green mamba envenomation at our facility. And basically, he was monitored constantly from 2 minutes after the bite until hospitalization. 20 minutes later, we could start seeing that his blood pressure was dropping. He was becoming hypotensive and complaining of paresthesia, pins and needles, difficulty in swallowing. At that stage, we immediately used 5 vials of SA polyvalent, and this was a very large green mamba. And it was basically a good feeding response. This guy put his hand in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he paid for that. And 5 vials of antivenom within 15 minutes, dramatic improvement for the patient. Blood pressure started to come up again, and the systemic signs started to disappear. And we've seen this with black mamba bites as well. Because we're getting to the bites very, very quickly, once we see that signs and symptoms are starting, we go with the antivenom, we go with the low dose first. If there's no response within 15 to 30 minutes, we can give another dosage of antivenom. This is very different to a lot of doctors out there and hospitals out there which are seeing patients maybe 6 hours, maybe 8 hours, maybe 24 hours post-bite. I'm a believer in antivenom. I'm an antivenom fanboy. I will tell you that. I've seen amazing results with snakebite antivenoms. So I'm a strong believer in it. And in our case, where we get to see these bites so rapidly after these people are envenomated, we are getting really, really great results. So the important thing to remember with this as well is if signs and symptoms deteriorate or do not improve after the initial dose of antivenom, you might need to give more antivenom. So the administration of antivenom, always important to remember, and this is again thanks to our snakebite flipper chart, a really good information source if you need a lot of good information on snakebite in South Africa. If antivenom is indicated, pre-treatment should be done according to a standardized protocol. So confirmation antivenom is needed, the patient is symptomatic, prepare the patient with a pre-dose of adrenaline, 0.25 of a milligram, it's basically a quarter of an ampoule, subcut into either thigh, abdominal wall or forearm, and a doctor should always be present during these administrations. Steroids and antihistamines may form part of the treatment if anaphylaxis occurs, but is usually not given as a pre-treatment. There's a ton of research that was done from 2001 in countries like Brazil, Sri Lanka, India, and these were peer-reviewed in major cohorts of 1,000 or more people. And the conclusion was you do not give steroids and antihistamines as part of the pre-treatment regime. You rather use low-dose subcut adrenaline. You're going to have a better response. However, if you do have anaphylaxis occurring, you stop the antivenom give more adrenaline, and then if indicated, you start off with your antihistamine and your steroids. So they do not form part of your pre-treatment protocol. Adrenaline only. So in the SAVP scenario, you take your initial dose of antivenom and you dilute it into 200 ml of isotonic infusion, which is always interesting because we always battle to get more than 8 vials into a 200 ml solution. You first have to run a few mils out before you can add the last 2 vials. Excuse me. And how does this administered? So once you've given your pre-dose of adrenaline, you start your antivenom infusion, usually about 10 minutes after the injection of the adrenaline, and you infuse it over a period of around 30 minutes. Again, just there without the use of steroids and antihistamines. I see this still regularly today. We get into hospital to ID the snake, and the ER staff administered a cortisone and antihistamine. And sometimes these snakes are actually non-venomous species as well. So be prudent with your steroids and your antihistamines. So this is the basic way that snake antivenom is given for SAVP. The PANF is very, very similar. So you take your initial antivenom dosage, which in this case is going to be 20 vials, diluted into isotonic infusion, and it's also given without a test dose. So you do not first give a small dose and then see what happens, and then a bigger dose and then see what happens. You're wasting time. So you pre-treat with your adrenaline, wait 10 minutes. Once you've waited, you start your antivenom infusion. So the administration is done on a 1-to-1 basis. So basically 1 ml of antivenom to 1 ml of isotonic fluid. And this is given IV over a period of 30 to 60 minutes. Again, without the use of steroids or antihistamines. PANF has gone one step further in stating that the total volume of antivenom in dilution should not exceed more than 500 ml per hour. They're worried about fluid overload. I think these are in facilities where there's not really good attention being paid or good facilities available to actually monitor the patient. I see in our local hospitals there are various protocols used, but this is the standard one. You take that antivenom, you dilute it. You can actually do antivenom via IV push direct method, but the antivenom dilution methods seem to be superior, and this is what is recommended nowadays. So very, very similar. If you start looking at this here, there are quite a few similarities between the SAVP product and the PANF. So the important thing is always, again, you're injecting a foreign protein, and all foreign proteins have the potential to cause reactions in humans. And we get 3 basic types of reactions: anaphylactic or allergic type reactions. These usually develop very, very quickly within 3 to 60 minutes of starting antivenom. Symptoms, signs and symptoms again: cough, tachycardia, itching, urticaria, fever, nausea, vomiting, and headache. I've seen these reactions very often on the SAVP product. Usually, if you look at the trunk of the patient's body, we leave that uncovered because that's where the reactions start, or on the back. But definitely the skin seems to be affected first before they start complaining of other problems. And we have seen some very severe problems, including patients which have required adrenaline-infused drips to continue the antivenom infusion. We've done this successfully, and no patients were lost due to allergic type reactions. So another reaction, and we see this regularly as well in the SAVP product, is pyrogenic reactions. These usually develop within 1 to 2 hours after starting the antivenom: chills, fever, vasodilation, and fall of blood pressure. It can happen. Pyrogenic reactions are usually associated with contaminants in the actual antivenom, and it can actually happen in any medication. So we know it is a risk. So you've delayed reactions, or so-called serum sickness, appears usually from day 5 to 24, average of 7 days after the injection of horse immunoglobulins. Itching, urticaria, fever, And basically proteinuria and some neurological signs and symptoms. It looks like the patient has caught a dose of the flu. They don't feel happy. They're sad. They're depressed. It can be quite debilitating. Different treatment protocols. We'll continue a little bit later, but I'd just like to show you guys here during pregnancy and lactation. I know of a couple of bites where they did not want to administer antivenom because the patient was pregnant. And from what we know and from all the literature out there, considering the risk associated with snakebite envenoming, pregnancy is not a contraindication for the administration of snake antivenom. I shared some very good photos in the group in December of 2022 of a bite where the patient was 4 months pregnant and had inflicted upon herself some very painful cuts in a puffer envenomation. We were able to use antivenom on her and save her baby, her life and her limb. So contraindications when it comes to antivenom, there's no known contraindications for the administration of antivenoms. And antivenom reaction treatments. So again, all foreign protein has the potential to cause anaphylactic or anaphylactic type reactions. If these reactions occur, immediately stop your antivenom infusion. According to your protocol, administer adrenaline. Possible administration of quick-acting solucortives and antihistamines. These can be administered IV. If pyrogenic reactions occur, very often that works wonders is intravenous paracetamol. It seems to work relatively quickly, and the patients are very thankful for it. Point number 5. Once the patient has stabilized, begin antivenom infusion again, slowly. We've seen this on a regular basis. Patients have reactions. Stop the antivenom, some adrenaline, patient is stable, and then very, very slowly you start that antivenom infusion. Remember, that venom is still on board that patient and it's doing what it's designed to do. It hasn't gone away, and the indications for giving that antivenom are still there. You've just got to be cautious in giving it. If serum sickness occurs, serum sickness should be treated with a course of 5-day course of antihistamines. And there's a couple of dosages, and these were provided to us by WHO and Dr. Roger Blaylock. So guys, the wheel has been invented. It's down here. It's been tried and tested. All of this information is available and it works. So some people might be a bit nervous about giving very high dosages of antivenom. And so I spent the whole of last night basically going through some very obscure journals, some very interesting information that I did find. So basically, the important thing to remember as well is antivenom is not perfect. It's not by far not a perfect product. It has a narrow window of use. And something for us to remember is time is tissue. The quicker definitive treatment is actually given, which is i.e. antivenom, the better the clinical results are going to be. So we see this time and again. This is used in other countries. Time is tissue, specifically in North America, where they have also a problem with snakebite. And if they use this saying, they tend to have better outcomes. So please remember, if you do have a snakebite, time is tissue. So what do we know about the number of vials given in antivenom? So there was a clinical profile of snakebite envenomation in children, and this was published in the Gangaram journal in India in 2013. And in this, they actually have reports of a child receiving 197 vials of antivenom for a crate envenomation. So the Indian antivenoms come in a 10 ml vial. So that's 1.970 mils, 1,970 mils of antivenom in a child. And in their findings, the average dose given for severe envenomation was between 40 and 60 vials of antivenom. So we can see even in pediatric patients, in some cases, very large dosages of antivenom have been used. These are also Fab 2 products, and they've had good results with them. There's another review and treatment of complications in 79 children in rattlesnake bite, and this was done in Mexico, published in Sage publication in 2008. And from their research, they had one child which received 69 vials of antivenom. And the average dosage there for severe envenomation was around 40 miles. These are in pediatric patients, some as young as 3 to 4 years of age. And then a very interesting and obscure one, which I dug out, but a history there, was a king cobra bite that occurred in Thailand at the Red Cross Society. This is where they actually milk the snakes. This patient was attempting to milk a king cobra, which latched onto his arm. And over a 24-hour period, he actually required 115 vials of antivenom to save his life. That's 1,150 mils of antivenom, but he survived. Here is the point I would like to bring to your attention, is the internet. If you go online, you're going to find antivenoms all over the place. I can hook you guys up with some Nigerian guys that have got some good product. A lot of the African countries, Nigeria, Congo, and a whole range of other African countries are suffering from a huge problem of fake antivenoms. And these antivenoms are available online on the internet, and you can buy it. Usually they're pretty expensive, and what's inside these so-called antivenoms is anybody's business. There have been some tests on these antivenoms. Some have contained actual toxic properties. Some are actually made up of chalk. And in quite a few of these antivenoms, there's unknown substances. So I would not advise you going online to go and buy an antivenom. You don't know what you're getting. So please be cautious. So when it comes to the resources which I used to compile this talk, this is a very brief summary of those resources. If you go and do a literature search, if you go and look at the literature available in the 1980s, 1990s, and an absolute explosion from the year 2000 up until today, you're finding many, many hundreds, if not thousands, of articles on snake and snake bite and its treatment and venoms. So it's a very interesting subject, and there's a continuing updating of our knowledge, and it is out there. You've just got to go and do the research and look for it and find it in the right places. So this comes to the conclusion of my talk. And basically, this is where I'd like to introduce the South African antivenom distributors. So what we are doing is we provide expert identification of snakes to doctors and veterinarians treating snake bite. As you can see, we've offered courses to various hospitals, doctors, postgrad students. And also what we've done is we contacted on a regular basis by the South African National Toxicology Hotline, especially when it comes to exotic bites. So this is what we do, and we're well connected in both the public and private sector. Our company staff include hepatologists, medical doctors, specialist consultant pharmacists, and veterinarians. And we are the sole authorized importer and distributor of premium serums and venoms into South Africa. What I can say to you about this is we're currently busy with our SAPRA documentation. And our aim here is to be able to bring in quantities of antivenom which are effective against South African snakes. South African snakes are used in the production of their venoms, and we know that this antivenom is effective. We've seen the neutralization tests and results dating back 6 to 7 years already, that these articles have appeared in peer-reviewed journals. So we know that these products are working. We know about the product. It's also the only GMO certified product, and more specifically WHO certified product. None of the other stuff have that. So please, this is my email address below. If you have any questions, there's my cell phone number. You're more than welcome to give us a shout. We'd like to be able to chat to everybody. And our aim is basically, we're there to try and end suffering. As I said to you guys earlier, we see all the consequences of these bites in animals and humans, and it's absolutely tragic what is actually happening at this stage. And I'm sure all of you have got stories that you know and that have affected you personally, and you've seen this firsthand. So in conjunction with this now, to overcome these fake antivenoms or ineffective antivenoms, we've developed an integrity chain. So the antivenoms come directly from the producer to us, and then we send it out to the necessary institutions for them to be able to do what they need to do with it. And at the end of the day, our goal is to save lives. And this is actually quite easily achievable. And I'd like to say, with the support of all the people on the talk today, that we can actually start doing this. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you very, very much for all coming along. I hope I've been able to answer some of your questions. I do understand now, Mandy, we're going to have a question and answer session, possibly.
We absolutely are. And the first question comes from Kevin McEwen in Durban. They see quite a lot of snakes. And the one was a cost per amp to patient, or cost per treatment to patient, compared to what we currently pay.
We're in the process of finalization of that. As soon as we have those details, we will make them available.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, if I may answer here, is that we can't rely on one supplier anymore. We have to have other stuff on the shelf so that we don't run into trouble. And in fact, if you look at this in terms of the loss that I have of antivenom that expires, and that is a cold chain, I mean, just one problem with a cold chain. So I think it's important that we have other stock in the country, and I'll make sure that I fight Jason for a good price. He's not here. I'm not going to. We need. It's about saving lives. It's not really about anything else.
Correct.
And I as soon as I know that, Kevin, what I'm paying, I'll let you know. Because remember, the PANAF has a higher requirement in terms of the neutralization, and so instead, where we now currently use anything between 6 and 10 amps, depending on what the patient's response is, we would probably need to use probably 12, 15 amps per patient, but then it's also on the shelf, no fridge, and it's got a 4-year expiry. Hope to get that sorted if we do when it does arrive. Kevin says PANAF is a win. There you go. You've got one. Kevin, you can actually unmute and talk. I don't mind. You've got one fan. Well, two, me and Kevin. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin. And Kevin, currently at Netcare, I've got 113 amps across all my hospitals of polyvalent. Monovalent is even worse. Yes, there is some stock coming out, but this is back orders. 113 amps is 13 snake bites. And that means I've also got to support the state sector as well, and other sectors, private and public. We can't hold on to our snake antivenom if other people don't have it. And I know there are people on the group here that have no antivenom whatsoever, and I haven't had it for a while. And we've been moving antivenom around the country to try and cope with the snake bites. And in fact, we've been making decisions that have been like really difficult. Do we, don't we? Do we, don't we? Do we, don't we give antivenom? And just so that we can save it for the really sick ones out there. Jason, you had a dog. Somebody a dog bite, didn't you, recently? Your daughter?
Yes, that was yesterday morning.
She got bitten by a snouted, hey?
Yes, her pet dog, they stay in Pretoria North, and her pet was envenomated by a large snouted cobra. She phoned me, obviously in a flat spin and a panic, and told her, go off to your closest veterinary clinic, had a good chat with the veterinarian on duty, said to them, we've got antivenom available. It would take us about an hour to get there. In the meantime, try the neostigmine and atropine on the dog. We're trying to prolong life. They also provided O2 support. The veterinarian was saying that from their perspective, the neostigmine improved functions on the dog until we got there. We administered 2 vials of Panef antivenom, and within 15 minutes, that dog was sitting up. I did share the photos with you guys. I know of a couple of other cases of it being used. I also know of a Jameson's mamba envenomation where a patient was bitten. Took him an hour to get to a hospital. ID of the snake was confirmed, and they used 5 vials of Panef, and that patient survived. So there are reports coming out of the efficacy, and funny enough, again, no reports of reactions to this product. Even though it is a possibility, we are not seeing it.
Thanks. There's a question from Christoph. I know, Christoph, you're probably one of the people who has no anti-venom at this stage. I just want to show you Jason's dog, or Jason's daughter's dog. I don't know if you can see this. There's the poor oak. He looks like a snouted cobra right now. And there he is after the anti-venom, sitting up 30 minutes after the anti-venom. So the group also helps our animals. We're not necessarily, well, the human animals and then the animals. We help both of them. Can you answer Christoph's, how difficult would it be to convince the government to keep this product as a backup with all the red tape they put up? Me wondering, would be more expecting a definitive answer. That's got to do with your Section 21. You'll be the one who keeps the product. Is that correct?
Correct. So basically at this stage of the game, our paperwork is in. We want to bring in 5,000 vials. We've calculated that of immediate concern. We need to build up stocks. We're going into a quieter period now with the weather changing into winter, but it's 3 to 4 months, and then we're going to be back in full swing, and the bites are going to start in earnest again. So we're looking at our first shipment bringing in at least 5,000 vials. The company has stated to me that they will be putting 20,000 vials aside for me for this year, this financial year. So we have the capacity, once we've completed our red tape, to actually get this stuff in and give it to all corners of society which need it.
Thanks. Are there any other questions for Jason? Please unmute if you want to ask a question. Is there anything, do you understand how to give antivenom? Are there any issues around who gets and who doesn't? There was a patient that got antivenom the other week that didn't need it, Jason. You remember that, Snakebite?
We see that sometimes. Patients come in, they're having a panic attack, and the doctors are very concerned, and the patients come in with a dead snake, and instead of putting photos on the group or asking for advice what species of snake it is, they start a treatment protocol. A few hours later, they send you the photo. You see the snake. It's a brown house snake or an egg eater or something along those lines.
Or a stiletto. Painful,
it happens.
Painful, but not needed. And guys, at the moment, with the current shortage and with stock not in the country of Panef, we need to be very sure we're giving antivenom to the right snakes. And I posted the link to the NSAG to the where you can report your snake bites, https://www.nsbd.co.za.nsbd, and you can download the flipper charts there. And if you just also follow, in certain hospitals we've got snake bite pathways. Those flipper charts were done from the pathways that we worked with Swaziland, did excellent work. We took Swaziland's excellent work, turned it into our excellent work, and then they took our excellent work and we turned it into flippers. So there's been good collaboration with Swaziland in developing those pathways. You need to follow the pathway, please. And most of all, don't let anyone do a fasciotomy of anything without talking to one of our snakebite guys. It's absolutely not necessary in most instances. In other instances, it may be, but in most instances, not necessary. Jace, I don't see any other questions. Tim, have the flip charts been updated? Tim, I'll take that offline with you. No. So we'll take that offline and we'll probably update it and put it through NSAG going forward because lots of people want the flipper charts. So we'll update them. Thanks very much. But I'll take it offline. So Jason, you passed because you've had some big guys listening to your talk. I appreciate it. I understand a lot more about anti-venom. If there aren't any other questions, can we let Jason go? I think he needs a beer now. And then if you guys do have some exotic snake bites like these diamondback things that they bring from the US, rattlesnakes, there's Johan Marais, there's Jason. He has to keep the anti-venom because he has them in his snake park and they are obliged to keep it, as are people who keep it as a pet or whatever it may be. Not why I would want a pet that rattles his tail, but anyway, and are expensive, unfortunately, because they're imports. They come in dollars, but sometimes we're able to help a victim, and we have helped quite a few victims. Okay, so yeah, Annie says thank you, and how difficult, and that's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And always please remember, snakebite and its treatment, it's a team effort. And I'm very grateful to all of you. We've had such good, the ability to actually work together and meet different people and have such valuable outcomes from all of this. And Mandy, thank you very, very much for being a big driver behind all of this.
Huge pleasure. And remember that we're also regionalizing anti-venom at this stage because we've got such limited stock. You'll find that we're taking stock away from some hospitals and putting them at other hospitals. Remember the anti-venom belongs to the people who get bitten, not to the particular hospital that it's at. So we need to be aware that we are moving stuff around. So if you want CPD points, this is your last time to put your number up for your MP number or your veterinary number or your, I don't know, you guys, your herpetologists, the snake charmers, they don't have a number, but at least we've got a record of them attending. And thank you. Would I be able to distribute this presentation to people? Would you give me the actual presentation, Jason?
100%. I will be emailing it to you shortly.
Stunning. You can PDF it so nobody can change it. Okay.
Perfect. 100%.
When you put the flippers on, do you mind?
No problem at all.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks very much. Really.